Hi everybody, I'm Tracy from Jivana. Today we are talking about the elements, the doshas, and the gunas. This is kind of like video part 2 on the basics of Ayurveda. We already covered Prakruti and Vikruti. That was video number 1. So let's get started here on part 2 of the basics. Ayurveda is based on the knowledge that the 5 elements, air, ether, fire, water, and earth, make up everything in the universe. So everything that we can see, smell, touch, handle, like our clothes, the trees, all of that stuff, including our doshas, are made up of all 5 elements. That also includes, though, everything we can't see and touch. So like the air, we can't necessarily see air or handle air, but we can sense that it's there. So when the wind blows, we know air is real, right? Also things like our thoughts or our unconscious, that is also there. And we can also say that our conscious is also made up of the 5 elements. That's a little bit harder to wrap our head around, but take my word for it, it is also made up of the 5 elements, and we'll get to that. So the proportion of the 5 elements is different in everything in the universe, and that's what is important to keep in mind. But the proportion of the elements within us, which make up the doshas as well, is truly what guides our personal physiology. So your personal constitution or your dosha makeup that you're born with, or your vikruti, which is what you are right now or which varies from day to day, is really what guides your physiology at any given time. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So to break things down even further, there are 20 gunas. So gunas are really just qualities. They're just attributes that we apply to everything. And that just makes things a little bit easier when we go to apply like foods and lifestyle habits to balance our doshas. So gunas are like hot, cold, light, dry. So when we want to go say, well, I need to be a little bit healthier, I need to eat a little bit healthier, but I don't know what to do to balance my dosha. Well, if you need to balance kapha, for instance, say, well, my kapha is too high, then you want to apply lighter attributes. So again, we'll get into this a little bit further, but the gunas are what help you do that. So gunas are just attributes or qualities that define things a little bit better than just air and ether, fire, water, and earth. That's a little bit harder. So the gunas are just, they break things down a little bit further for us. And I'll explain that as we get further into the video. So Agni is the 3rd principle, or fire, and it influences the interaction between the individual forces and creates the charge and electricity, which further manifests as light and heat. So here is where we say, like, fire is not really a flame, right? There's no fire inside our body, but it's the potential of the energy and the heat. So no fires inside our body, it's just the heat and the potential of heat. So this heat energy is responsible for the transformation to occur. Just think of like heat, the potential of heat, or like if you have a pot on the stove and you warm up or you start to boil water and put in some sugar or salt or something, and it dissolves the sugar or water. That's the power of heat. So the same thing happens inside our body. So where there's heat, where there's Agni, it starts to dissolve or digest or metabolize everything that we eat. Not only what we eat, but what we drink. It even digests and transforms our thoughts. So it's much deeper than just food. The next element is water. Water in Sanskrit is called apas, and it is the basis for the initial consolidation so a consolidation meaning moving into something more solid, into the material form. We're going from subtle, remember we're going from just pure potential into something of a solid state. So now we're into water, and now we're going to earth. And earth is the final stage, and now we have something solid. So at the final stage, earth represents all things of structure, all things that we now honestly can handle, see, feel, touch, even probably measure. So in the body, that would be skin, bones, muscles, eyeballs, hair, like really anything that we can see or touch. In the universe, it's everything that we can see or touch. So earth represents everything solid, everything of matter that we're used to handling. So it's the grossest form of all matter. Unlike air or thoughts or consciousness, which are more like the ether and air elements, earth is the grossest form. So remember, the elements are not literal, they're energetic. And it's like a continuum. So we're just moving from nothingness to something solid, maybe. And maybe it stops along the way. Something might not ever manifest as something solid. It might only be something that ends up as air, or something that ends up as fire. But this is the process of getting there. And also, once you reach something solid, it doesn't stay there. That's the final end point. So think of like a rock or a mountain, or that's the final destination. What happens to a rock or a mountain? It doesn't stay that way. It erodes. The elements, all the other elements, air and water and fire, work on that rock or mountain until it returns back to earth, till it returns back to dust. So it's a continuum. It just keeps working the system, right? It just keeps going back and forth. That's the nature of the universe. So let's move on to the doshas. Those, we've covered the 5 elements and how they work and how they develop. Now let's see how they make up each dosha. So starting at the most subtle dosha, the most subtle dosha is Vata. So again, all doshas are comprised of each of the elements. So Vata dosha has all 5 elements in it. However, it mostly has air and ether. Vata is the subtlest of the doshas, so it's very, very light. It's very, very light in nature. So when you think of Vata dosha, you think of movement, because it's so light. It's responsible for all movement within the body. You maybe have heard in yoga classes, if you do yoga, you've heard of prana. We often talk about prana in yoga, like feel the prana, or increase your prana, or pranayama. Prana is a subdosha of Vata. So prana is like air, prana is like the breath, or the life force, or the life energy. That's all true. But Vata is responsible for movement of the blood through the veins. It's responsible for your heartbeat, your nerve impulses, your thoughts, the movement of your thoughts. Anything that requires movement in your body, Vata is responsible for. If you didn't have Vata, you would not be alive. You need Vata. You need all your doshas, but you need Vata. So its main functions are doing all of this movement throughout your body. Your inhale, your exhale, your sending your impulses, moving your blood, like I said. So those who are prominent in Vata dosha, if your prominent dosha is Vata, if you think air and ether, you think very light. So those people are very light in nature. They're very slender. They have prominent joints, I should say, because of their low body mass index, because they just don't have a lot of structure. They have low kapha, so they don't have a lot of structure to them. They have small and delicate pores. Everything about them is kind of just small and light. So their hair is light and dry. Their skin is dry and tends to be like just kind of dry and rough. They lack moisture because they don't have very much kapha in them generally. They just tend to lack water. So that's on a physical level. On an a mental physical level, they tend to be very, very creative. So if you think light, you think like it comes up here, right? So think brain. So they're very creative and whimsical. They also kind of flit from one idea to the next. So they're like, this would be great, that would be great. Let's go to this, let's go to that. So they have a hard time staying on one idea. They also have a hard time multitasking because they tend to juggle more than one idea at a time. They get many things in the air at once, and then all the balls drop because they just have a hard time with that multitasking. But they're fun to be around because they tend to be cheeky and funny, and they just are kind of carefree. So, but when they're out of balance, they have problems with dryness. So when you are out of balance with your dosha, usually your prominent dosha goes high. That usually is the case. So that's what I'm going to describe. So when Vata Dosha goes high, you have excess air and ether. So your skin gets extra dry. Your GI system gets extra dry. So you tend to have constipation. And then if you have extra air and ether up here, then you have insomnia, you have headaches, you get nervous and stressed out and worried, and those are the symptoms of excess Vata. So the next dosha is Pitta. So that's fire and water. In Pitta Dosha, fire tends to dominate. I just don't see water tending to dominate so much in Pitta. It's generally fire that dominates. So Pitta Dosha people tend to be very organized and driven, compassionate, smart people. So I've written a blog about all the doshas that's on the website. And so the blog about Pittas is called Leader of the Doshas. Pitta's Leader of the Doshas. And I think I made a reference to, if you're ever traveling, you always want to have a Pitta in your group because you'll never get lost. You can just lean on the Pitta person in your group and they will take care of you. On the other hand, you may not want to lean on the Vata person because they won't have a plan. They'll just, kind of wing it. You probably get really cool pictures with the Vata person, but you're not going to have a plan if that's important to you. Anyway, with the Pitta person, you'll have a plan. They are motivated and they're right in the center of the doshas. So they're medium everything, pretty much. They're medium stature, they're medium build, everything about them is just kind of medium. Not that they're average. They're not average in any way, I'm not trying to say that, but they're athletic and muscular and competitive. They don't like to lose. Because of the fire element, because that kind of reigns in the Pitta, they have fair skin and freckles and moles. They tend to sunburn easily. Their hair tends to be light and fine, so they will either be red or blonde or have some kind of an auburn undertone to their hair or reddish undertone to their skin. When out of balance, Pittas will have a tendency towards acid reflux, thinking of fire here. So acid reflux, redness to the skin, so hives, rosacea, any kind of dermatitis or inflammation to the skin, any type of burning, so autoimmune conditions, diarrhea, and on a mental level, on an emotional or mental level, in balance, Pittas will be very competitive, driven. They're very successful individuals. They tend to have very high-paying jobs, successful in life, but out of balance, they are prone to anger and irritability, and they are very critical of themselves and other people. Okay, last but not least is Kapha. So Kapha is made up of earth and water, and they are your best friend. Kaphas are amazing individuals. When I think of Kapha individuals, I think of Mrs. Claus. Not because of the red suit or the white hair, but because you can always go to a Kapha person for like cookies and a big hug. They are like the best friends. They're the best friends that you never want to let go of, you never want to leave. They're the sweetest people in the universe. Kaphas are like milk and honey. If milk and honey is a person, that's a Kapha person. Kaphas are made of earth and water, so they have the most structure to them. So they have a more solid frame, more solid than Vata or Pitta Dosha. They also have thicker skin, more moisture to their skin, thicker hair, round features, so round eyes, full lips. They're voluptuous, they're gorgeous people. They're usually the envy of everyone because they have just like this thick, wavy, beautiful hair. Just they're gorgeous people. They also are the best secret keepers. They're very loyal. They're just naturally loyal, giving, nurturing, maternal people. So when you get lost, like I was giving this scenario earlier, you're on a trip, you want to have a Pitta person as your tour guide, you want to have the Vata person taking your picture, and you want to have the Kapha person, so when you get lost, you can turn to her for a hug because she's going to say, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine, we're going to be okay. So that's the person you want to keep in your back pocket too. You want to have a friend from every group, really. They all have their positive attributes. Also, on a physical level, Kaphas tend to have fantastic immunity. They tend to not get sick very often. They have fantastic stamina. They may not want to get up and go very often. It takes a little bit to get them off the couch to go because they like to sit and read and watch movies, but once you get them going, they can outlast everyone. So let's go over the gunas that make up each dosha. The gunas that make up Vata are dry, subtle, mobile, clear, and rough. The gunas that make up Pitta are hot, dry, light, sharp, and mobile. So if you think about fire, fire's hot and dry, obviously. It's light, sharp, and fire travels, so it's mobile. And then lastly, the gunas that make up Kapha, so earth and water, are dense, hard, wet, cool, cloudy, smooth, and static. So if you think of like a huge rock, it's very hard to move, right? Think of like a big boulder, it's really hard to move that. But once you get it moving, it's really hard to stop it. So it's really hard actually to get Kapha out of balance. But once it gets out of balance, it's really hard to get it back into balance. Unlike Vata goes out of balance super easy, but it goes back into balance, in fact, very easily as well. So Vata is kind of all over the place. That's just their nature, but Kapha is very steady. So if you're normally, if your primary dosha is Kapha, you're probably pretty even-tempered. It's very hard to get you riled up. But once you're once you get into an off mood, you stay there for a while. You might notice that. That wraps up our video on the doshas, elements, gunas. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. I know it's a lot, but it's not that hard once you get used to it. Just kind of keep the basics in mind. Just opposites, balance. We have all the elements and all the gunas in us. We have all the doshas in us. You have to know your prakruti, you have to know your vikruti, and you want to match up your vikruti to your prakruti. And if you can keep that in balance, you're golden. Once it gets out of balance, you're not going to feel very good. So stay tuned. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, sign up for the newsletter. We give you lots of tips on how to, keep your diet healthy, how to, different Vata recipes, Pitta recipes, skincare tips, how to keep your skin healthy, promotions for our skincare line. And if you haven't filled out the quiz yet, definitely do that. So yeah, this was a big one. Thanks for tuning in again. See you next time.